Graduating from UA, he began his studies at the University of Alabama School of Medicine. During his first year of medical school, he met Diane Jones in Montgomery. They were married in 1965. He graduated with his MD in 1968 and began his one-year internship at Caraway Methodist Hospital in Birmingham. In 1969, during the Vietnam conflict, Bentley joined the United States Air Force, where he was commissioned as a captain and served as general medical officer. He was stationed at Pope Air Force Base at Fort Bragg, where he became the hospital commander near the end of his tenure. Following his military service, Bentley began 3 years residency at the University of Alabama in dermatology. After completing his residency, the Bentleys made Tuscaloosa their home and raised 4 boys. Robert and Diane are now proud grandparents of 5 granddaughters. Robert has founded a number of small businesses, the most successful of which is the Alabama Dermatology Associates. As president of Alabama Dermatology Associates, Dr. Bentley managed the practice growth into one of the largest dermatology practices in the Southeast United States. Dr. Bentley was elected into the Alabama House of Representatives in 2002 and served 2 terms before declaring his candidacy for governor. As a member of the Education Appropriations Committee, Bentley played a key role in passing a balanced budget each year as he served in the legislature. He also sponsored legislation to cut taxes for Alabama families and is opposed to raising taxes. Bentley is the chief sponsor of the Alabama Reemployment Act of 2010, which is estimated to create at least 5,000 new jobs in Alabama without increasing taxes or government spending. As the Republican nominee for governor, Dr. Robert Bentley is committed to putting Alabamians back to work, cleaning up corruption in Montgomery, and stopping the intrusion of the federal government in our everyday lives. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert Bentley.
Well, good afternoon. It's good to be an Arab. I've got my pen on right here. It's good to be an Arab. It's good to be around friends. I see a lot of friends out here that I've met as I've campaigned across the state, and I appreciate the support that you've given me here in Marshall County, and it made a tremendous difference as we ran this campaign, and I thank you for that. You know, I am a conservative candidate. I am a conservative, pro-life, pro-family candidate. But you know what? Families in Alabama today are hurting. And they're hurting because they don't have a job. And that's the #1 issue that we face in Alabama today is our economy. And as governor, every waking minute I'm going to spend it trying to put people back to work. Now, I have said that I'm not going to take a salary until we reach full employment, which is 5.2%. And of all the things that I said in my campaign, I think that resonated with the people of Alabama more than anything else because the people are hurting. I didn't want it to come across as a gimmick, and you know, it did not, because as I crossed this state, at least 75% of the people, as I would go through every small town across Alabama, large town, they would say, "Aren't you that doctor that's not going to take a salary?" And I said, "I am." They'd say, "Well, I'm going to vote for you." And they appreciate that because I know what it is to be without money because I grew up poor. In Columbiana, my daddy was a sawmiller. He had a pulpwood truck the last few years of his life. I helped load pulpwood in the summertime, and it made me decide very quickly that I wanted to be a doctor. But I understand what it is to not have a lot of money, and I want to identify with those people who are hurting today. That over 200,000 people in this state right now who need a job, they don't have a job. We want to find good jobs for these people. We want to create jobs. We want to create an environment in Alabama by which we can entice industry in Alabama. I want to do things like we did in the legislature this last year. Many of the guys that are in here with me today that served with me in the legislature, we unanimously passed the Reemployment Act of 2010, which will give up to 50% deduction to a company. If you'll hire somebody off the unemployment roll and keep them for a year, you can take up to 50% of their salary off your state income tax. And that's just the type of thing that we need to do on a short-term basis. We need to stimulate companies and help companies create jobs. It's not the government's role to create jobs. It's the government's role to create an environment through which companies create jobs. And that's what I want to do. And that's the attitude that I want to take to Montgomery. We need to have an environment in Alabama also to entice new industry. And we're going to continue many of the things that have been taking place over the last 8 years. We've had a good environment. We're going to continue that. And I want companies that are looking at Alabama to realize that a new administration will keep the promises that have been made by this present administration in order to try to keep these jobs coming in. I don't want them to be frightened by a new administration, because we will keep the promises that we've made. If we've made promises to give tax breaks and tax incentives, that's what we're going to do. The environment that we need to create in Alabama is like this. We need to always keep Alabama a right-to-work state. Of all the reasons that we can entice companies to come here, of all the reasons, that's number one. If we were not a right-to-work state, we would not have Honda, Hyundai, Mercedes, any of these companies. None of these companies would be here in Alabama if we were not a right-to-work state. Number two, we need to have well-trained workers, and we need to do that through our two-year system. Our two-year systems have done a great job, and I am proud of our two-year systems. We've had some corruption in our two-year systems, but let me tell you, we've had some great two-year systems, and I'm going to continue to support them. I also want to help high schools develop training programs for students in high schools, working with the two-year systems, and all of those working with industry to determine what kind of workers we need to train. We need to keep the cost of doing business low in the state. That means we keep the cost of energy low. That's why we need to oppose this American Clean Energy and Security Act, which is called cap and trade. Part of it is. That's not the worst part. But most people know it as cap and trade. We need to oppose that, because that's going to hurt individuals and it's going to hurt businesses. We need to keep taxes low. Now, I know we may be one of the lowest tax states in the country, and I am proud of it. But you know what? What that does is it helps entice businesses into Alabama. We need also to have good infrastructure. That's part of this environment that we need to create. Infrastructure is vital. And the infrastructure ought to be both population specific as well as industry specific, so that we can recruit industry into this state. We need to keep down unwarranted lawsuits in this state, because the lawsuits hurt industry. So those are the type of things that we need to do. We have an environment like that. We can bring people in, but never forget that most jobs are not created by Honda and Hyundai and Mercedes. Most jobs are created by companies that are already here. Small businesses. Those are the people I want to put an emphasis on their business, to keep them working and to help them hire more people. The infrastructure is already there in those companies. We don't need to create new infrastructure in those companies. I want to create under the governor's office an office of small business development, to teach people how to open small businesses and how to sustain those businesses. And we do that by helping many of the business entities that are in colleges across this state. They're about 15 or 16, and they work in vacuums. They don't work together, but I want to unite them and work under the governor's office to help small businesses develop. We need a new attitude in Montgomery. We need an attitude adjustment. And let me tell you, it's going to come from the governor. It's going to come from the top down. And the attitude adjustment is this: that the consumer is the taxpayer. That the consumer are businesses trying to create jobs. And we're going to work with DOT. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, we're going to make them do it. We're going to make sure ADO does what it's supposed to do. Montgomery needs an attitude adjustment, and we're going to make sure that that takes place. The federal government is intruding into our lives every day. No one can stand up to the federal government but a governor. That's it. The governor has the power to stand up. I will be the chief magistrate of the state of Alabama, and I'm going to stand up against the federal government as they intrude into our lives. I totally am opposed to, and we're going to talk about this in one of the questions, I am totally opposed to the takeover of the healthcare system in this country by the federal government. That is the worst thing that has ever happened in this country, is the takeover of healthcare in this country. There are other problems that we'll talk about in the question and answer. One deals with illegal immigration, and I'll give you my answer on that. I think this is another issue in which the states have to take the responsibility if the federal government is going to fail in their job. Montgomery needs a bath, and I've already said that. And we're going to do some cleaning up in Montgomery. I have said in the heat of the battle of a primary that we're going to clean house in Montgomery. And we are, but there are people who are doing a good job, and we're going to look and interview some of those people. That does not mean I'm going to keep them. But I am going to interview a lot of the people there, and I'm going to see who is doing a good job or who I think could fit into my administration. But Montgomery needs a bath. And let me tell you, we need transparency in Montgomery. We have been trying for years, and Jeff McLaughlin is one that sponsored this every year. We have been trying for years to ban pack-to-pack transfer in Montgomery. And it has always passed the House. And I've been in the House for 8 years, and I have voted for it every time that it's come out. It's not as strong as we'd like to have it, but we got out what we could get out. But we need transparency. You need to know where every penny goes that you send to Montgomery. We in government need to realize, and we need to make you realize, that we understand that money that comes down there is not our money. It's your money. And we need to make sure that you know where your money goes. I want to set an example in the governor's office. I've already released my tax returns. You know that last year I made $112,000 last year. That's how much money I made. I gave $15,000 to charity, and most of that was to the church because I tithe. So you know a lot about me. You know that, but I want you to know those things about me. I have nothing to hide. I want to be an honest governor, and I want you to be able to look at me and say, I am proud of that guy. I am proud for him to be my governor. So I'm going to set the example. We're going to make sure that there are no more consulting fees or kickbacks to lobbyists for contracts in the state of Alabama. That is over. In my administration, I can tell you it's over. So we're going to do some house cleaning, and we're going to do some transparency, and we're going to start with my office as the governor. Then we're going to work on the legislature, and we're going to do some things in the legislature, and we're going to clean that up also. I've had the privilege as I've crossed this state to meet so many people. You know, and they're wonderful people. The nice thing about my election was this. The Republican Party, just like the Democrat Party, oftentimes chooses their candidates. Well, I was not the chosen candidate, not by the party. But you know who chose me? It was the people. And that shows us we should never forget that people elect their representatives, and they elect their governor. And I am so proud of them. I am so proud of the average working person out here that voted for me. Everywhere I would go, people would come up to me, and they still do. They come up to me and they'll say, I'm so proud that you're running. And I appreciate that. And you know, when all those guys came out against me, including the governor and senators and representatives, my numbers doubled. That ought to tell them something, shouldn't it? It ought to tell them that the people decide who is going to be elected, not the party. And no one that gives a whole lot of money, because I was $2 million of borrowed money to run this campaign, and my opponent, he had about $8 million of money that was given to him, and we still won. But it was the average, ordinary person. And as I close, I want to tell you about a lady. The other day I was in an airport, and I was leaving the airport. It was a big room. I'd shaken hands with everybody in there, and I'm going to close. I know it's time. I want to tell you about this lady, though. And as I was leaving the room, I looked way back in the back, like that lady right back there. She was back there with her camera. But this lady was mopping, and she was working. And I said, you know, I didn't shake her hand. So I put down everything I had. I went back to the back, and I said, ma'am, I don't want to bother you because you're working. And I said, but I want to tell you, my name is Robert Bentley and I'm running for governor. And I said, I sure would appreciate your vote. She looked at me and a big smile came over her face. She said, Dr. Bentley, she said, I know who you are. She said, I watched you as you were shaking hands with everybody else. And I watched you as you were leaving. She said, and I want to thank you for coming back and shaking hands with me. She said, but you don't have to worry about my vote. She said, I voted absentee yesterday and I've already voted for you. Let me tell you, that taught me a lesson that's very important. You never overlook anybody. And you know what? I want to be the governor of everybody. I'm going to unite this Republican Party. But let me tell you, I'm going to unite the state of Alabama. And I want to be everybody's governor. Black, white, Democrat, Republican. I'm going to be everybody's governor. And I look forward to serving you as your governor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bentley. That was good. Thank you. Ron Sparks comes from humble beginnings, born and raised in Fort Payne, Alabama. He learned the value of hard work from his mother and grandmothers who worked in DeKalb County stock mills. Ron began working in a stock mill while still in high school. After graduating from Fort Payne High School, Sparks enlisted in the United States Coast Guard and served as a member of the Honor Guard and in the search and rescue. He received numerous commendations and letters of merit, including the Commendation Medal for Meritorious Service and the Performance of Duty with Operational Distinguishing Device for saving passengers of an overturned sailboat from turbulent waters. Like so many young men in his generation, Ron Sparks furthered his education through the GI Bill and graduated from Northeast Alabama Community College. Ron Sparks has proven his leadership ability time and again over his career. In 1978, at the age of 24, he became one of the youngest county commissioners ever elected in the state of Alabama. He was a successful businessman in the Fort Payne area and was very active in his local community. He served as commander of the American Legion Post 89, vice president of the JCs, president of Fort Payne Athletic, president of Forest Avenue PTA and PTO, council vice president. He was also active in the United Givers Fund and the Kiwanis Club. In 1993, Sparks was appointed director of the DeKalb County 911 system and was instrumental in designing and implementing its online system. Ron Sparks has also shown his leadership abilities at the state level. He has served on several boards, including the Secretary of State's Task Force to reform election laws and the Lieutenant Governor's Task Force on Violence in Schools. In 1998, Sparks was elected state president of Alabama 911. In 1999, Sparks was appointed Assistant Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries. And in 2003, Sparks was sworn in as the Alabama Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries and was re-elected to that position in 2006 in a landslide victory after he won 62 of 67 counties. As Commissioner, Ron Sparks has focused on serious issues facing agriculture in Alabama and has strived to move Alabama and the Department of Agriculture forward into a new area. Sparks dedicated resources to help Alabama become less dependent on foreign oil and establish the Center for Alternative Fuels to serve as the central hub for information about alternative fuels. He saw to it that the state made great strides in the area of child nutrition by implementing several new programs, including the Farm to School program. Commissioner Sparks has also worked to open new markets for Alabama's farmers with national and international leaders, including the Secretary of Agriculture for the African nation of Benin, the Mayor of New Delhi, India, and the Agriculture Secretary for Italy. He expanded the Food Safety Division so that more imported food is tested for harmful chemicals that have been banned in the United States and has long been an advocate of protecting consumers with county of origin labeling. Thousands of pounds of imported seafood have been stopped before being served on Alabama dinner tables. And with that, would you please welcome Ron Sparks.
We're going to see if this will work right here. I have to use my hands when I talk a little bit. Can y'all hear me? Good deal, good deal. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to make it very clear. I'm not the opponent that had the $8 million, okay? Let me say thank you for allowing me to come back to northeast corner of the state of Alabama. Gosh knows it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I grew up just a few miles over the road here in a little place called Fort Payne, Alabama. I told the mayor, I said, you know, for many years I always tried to sidestep Arab. I used to come here back in the early 70s, and Arab football team give me a pretty good waxing out here on these football fields. I've had the opportunity to play all these folks over in Marshall County, Arab, Gunnersville, Albertville, but it's good to be back home. It's good to be before civic leaders and elected officials that I have so much respect for, and it's an honor to be able to run for governor of the state of Alabama, just as you've honored me to serve as your Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries for 2 terms. And I don't know anything that I've ever done in my life that I enjoy more than to get up every day and fight for farmers. That's what I've been doing for the past 7.5 years, fighting for farmers and fighting for consumers. And I've stood up against the federal government when they start talking about making poultry litter toxic waste and putting us out of business, and standing up against the federal government when it comes to food safety issues. Those are things that I've been doing for the past 7.5 years. But some of the things that I'm extremely proud of is some of our trade that we've been able to do as Commissioner of Agriculture. A lot of times people just look at it as Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries. I mean agriculture, but it's got industries. And we put industry back into the department. And we started traveling the world to create trade around the world. What does that do? It creates jobs. And that's what we've tried to do for the past 7 years, is to create jobs for the people of Alabama. Let me give you an example. By traveling to Cuba, people say, Commissioner, why are you going to Cuba? Well, because Cuba is less than 600 nautical miles from Mobile. The trips we've made to Cuba has allowed us to have trade with Cuba. Over 50% of the poultry that goes to Cuba today comes out of Alabama. Over 90% of the wood that goes to Cuba today comes out of Alabama. That's the way we've been able to promoting Alabama, creating jobs and fighting for our poultry industry across this state. We have many farmers across Alabama that work hard every day to continue to produce the safest, most economical food supply in the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those folks in Cuba eating Alabama chicken. And we're going to continue. You know, we traveled to India. 1.6 billion people in India. We opened up the first official trade office in India because we feel like there's opportunities to trade with India. We signed a resolution with the University of West Alabama and the University of Leon from Mexico, working with the former president, Vicente Fox, to try to have exchanges with our students so that because we live in such a global world today. We stood on the docks in Mobile, Alabama, when Vietnam and China was not producing their food at the same standard that my farmers were producing it. We stood on the dock and said, no, you're not going to send that food into Alabama because you don't produce it at the same standard that my farmers produce it. You now know where your food comes from. We've passed labeling laws across Alabama so that you know where your food comes from. That's important. I don't mind where you buy your food. I don't mind what you do. But you ought to know that it comes from Alabama or USA or Mexico or Vietnam, China, or Chile. We've been able to do those things. And when I looked at a statistic that said this generation of children was not going to outlive me and you, I stepped up to the plate and started a farm-to-school program where we buy satsumas from Mobile and Baldwin County and put them on every child's plate in Alabama. Where we buy peaches from Chilton County and put them on every child's plate in Alabama. We buy sweet potatoes from Coleman and put them on every child's plate. Now, if you've got a grandson or a son or a daughter that's coming home complaining about those sweet potatoes, you can blame them on me because I'm the guy that's been putting them on those plates. If we don't produce a healthier generation of folks, then the healthcare system in Alabama is going to be blown out the roof. Today in Alabama, you can't buy a soft drink with sugar in it in our schools. We're starting to teach this generation of children a better way of life, make better choices so that you grow up and be healthy and productive young men and women. So it's been an honor to work at the Department of Agriculture. I think we've taken the department to another level, realizing how important agriculture is to this state. The state of Alabama gave me $13 million to build one animal diagnostic lab at Auburn University. Ladies and gentlemen, I took that pot of money and built 3 animal diagnostic labs at Auburn University, not at Auburn, but across the state. I built one at Auburn, Alabama. I built one at Elba and Opp, Alabama. And I put one right here in Boaz, Alabama. You know why? Because agriculture is important to North Alabama. The poultry industry is important. The cattle industry is important. And now you have a state-of-the-art lab sitting right here in Boaz. And working with your legislators have helped me be able to find that funding to put that lab here. And that's what I want to do, is continue to reach out across lines and work with those that you elect. I'm not going to point fingers at those folks that you sent to Montgomery, Alabama, and tell you that they all need a bath, that they're all bad people. Folks, we all come from different environments and different locations around the state of Alabama. We have differences of opinions. And that's what makes Alabama great, is that we can put our opinions on the table and hopefully we come up with the right solution to help Alabama grow. But you and I both know that Alabama's in trouble with around 10% of unemployment in the state of Alabama. People need jobs. Home foreclosures is at the top, is running rapid in the state of Alabama. Education, $1.5 billion less today than we were 3 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Did you know that the state of Alabama, that we didn't send $1 back to our schools and our school districts this year to buy a book? Did you know that we didn't send $1 to buy a piece of paper or a piece of chalk? And did you know that school teachers are having to reach in their pocket every day to buy supplies for our students around Alabama, and that our school boards are about maxed out because they're having to go to the bank to borrow money to keep the doors open? And you know we're sending our children out into the streets to beg for paper and pencils and soap. And less than 7% of our children in Alabama get pre-K. That's a sad thing to me when we live in a global world. And we expect our children to compete in a global world when we're not giving them the education they deserve. Let me give you an example. The state of Georgia this year came out and said we just educated our millionth child in voluntary pre-K. If the state of Georgia quit educating their children today, didn't educate another child, and Alabama stays on the path that we're on right now, it would take Alabama 240 years to catch the state of Georgia. My children deserve the same education as those children in Georgia. Your children deserve the same education. Your grandchildren deserve it. And when only 7% in Alabama, you know what that is? 3,800 kids in Alabama got voluntary pre-K. You know, spending $1 on a child in pre-K is like spending $100 on a child that's 12 years old. If we don't give them that opportunity, then you know what happens. By the time they get into 8th or 9th grade or the 10th grade of high school, they get to the point they don't want to finish school. And what happens when we let our young men and young women get out of school? They go from the schoolhouse to the courthouse to the jailhouse. Then we go from spending $4,000 a year to educate our children to $14,000 a year to keep them in prison. Folks, I want to reverse that. I want to do everything that I can to help our children in Alabama. That's why I say the gaming industry in Alabama should be regulated. It should be controlled. And we should reach in there between 25 and 30% of their profits of revenue, and we need to be putting it in the state coffers today. The state of Alabama is broke. We are broke, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. The next legislative session in Montgomery, Alabama is going to be terrible if we don't start looking for some additional revenue. The problem is that we don't need to be taxing the people of Alabama. You pay enough taxes. And yeah, we do have our taxes low. Thanks to the legislature for the last 100 and something years. They've realized how important that property taxes are in Alabama and that we need to keep them low. But let me tell you, when I become the governor of the state of Alabama, we're not going to appraise your property every year. We're going to go back to appraising your property every 4 years like it was before we started it a long time ago. That's what we're going to do in Alabama. And ladies and gentlemen, I was a very fortunate young man to grow up in Fort Payne. My grandmother raised me. My grandmother lived to be 100 years and 9 months old. I can't stand here and tell you all the things that my grandmother gave me and the things that she taught me. And I can't imagine today not giving the quality of service to Medicaid and senior citizens across Alabama. But folks, our Medicaid system's broke. Our education system's broke. We're financially broke in this state. And we're continuing to argue over bingo and gambling in the state of Alabama. Folks, gambling has been in Alabama for 25 years. The problem is that we haven't taxed it. That's the problem. Go to Montgomery. Look around. Go down to exit 57 on 65. That's the problem. Are we going to continue to sit back and take our knife out and see how far we can cut? See how much deeper we can cut state services in Alabama? See how many more schools we have to close down and how many children don't get voluntary pre-K? Folks, we've got to educate our children so that they'll have an opportunity to compete globally. Our children don't compete against Tennessee and Georgia and Mississippi anymore. They compete against India and China, and they deserve an education. The state of Florida gives education $20 billion from the lottery. The state of Georgia this year gives education $883 million from the lottery. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm standing before you today and telling you that if I become the governor of the state of Alabama, I will fight for a lottery for the children of this state. The price of a college education is going up 3 times as fast as an average family income. They are children that are in our high schools today that would never have any hope of a higher education if we don't give them that higher education or give them that opportunity. So what I want to do is tell our young men and young women, you stay in school, you stay out of trouble, and when you walk across that graduating stage and you get a diploma in one hand, we ought to be giving you a scholarship in the other hand so that they can go to a college or go to a trade school or go to a vocational school so that they can have a better life in Alabama. There are so many children in Alabama that don't have that way of life, and we've got to continue to do everything that we can to do that. And I'm committed to fighting for the people of Alabama. I've served you for 7.5 years. You know me. You know what I stand for. I'm going to stand up for the right things for Alabama. I'm going to reach across party lines. Ladies and gentlemen, the Democrat Party don't have all the answers to problems in Montgomery. We've got to have Democrats, Republicans, and Independents working together. We've got to have leadership in Montgomery. You know, we talk about no-bid contracts. We had a campaign run on no-bid contracts for the last 7 years. But ladies and gentlemen, today there's $2.7 billion of no-bid contracts. I'm going to hire an inspector general to make sure that every dollar that comes to Montgomery is spent wisely. If we can collect 10% of those no-bid contracts, we'd have $270 million that we could put in education or Medicaid across Alabama. So I'm standing before you today saying to you, I want to be your governor. I want to serve it. I want to stand up for the right things. I want to reach across party lines and bring leadership to Alabama. I want to start a road program from North Alabama to South Alabama that we haven't done for the last 7.5 years. My road program will create 38,000 jobs in Alabama. Folks, infrastructure is not an expense. Infrastructure is not an expense. It's an investment. We've got to invest in our infrastructures. We've got to invest in our education system. And we've got to give the children in Alabama an opportunity to compete. And as your governor, I will tell you this. I will fight for these children every day. I will fight for them every day of my life. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I look forward to answering your questions. And I thank you so much for letting me come back home to North Alabama. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to start the debate format. Most everybody knows Archie Anderson. He's going to kind of moderate the debate, and we'll go ahead and kick that off.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. These questions were submitted by the Arab Chamber of Commerce, and each gentleman will have a couple of minutes to respond. There will be also a 1-minute response time if you would like. I would remind the audience we want to try to wrap up around 1 o'clock today. It may go a little over than that. If you have to leave, we understand that. We would like everyone to check the exit polls that the Arab Tribune has on your table for the audience. If you will fill those out, they would appreciate that. And the results will be published in a coming issue of the Tribune. Gentlemen, the first question is on the lottery. And what is your opinion on the development of a state lottery? First off, Mr. Bentley.
In 1999, we voted on the lottery. We voted down 55, I think it was 55, 45. I think that was what it was in 1999. We right now have a governor who has been sentenced to jail related to that lottery. Now, he's out on appeal right now. But, there's a lot of corruption that goes on with gambling in Alabama. And I personally am against gambling. We're going to have some indictments coming down from the grand jury on some legislators. And that's going to be in the near future. So I personally am against it. That is not the answer. That is not the answer to our situation in Alabama. The answer to our situation in Alabama is creating real jobs. And real jobs are jobs that we create through companies, and we give them tax breaks and tax incentives, and we help companies create jobs. Those are jobs that we need to create things. Lotteries don't create things, except problems. Now, I want to say this, though, about the lottery, or about bingo. I have said in this entire campaign that I trust the people of Alabama. And if we could have a bill that is totally fair, not written by the gambling industry, and allow the people of Alabama an up or down vote, I'm not opposed to that, because I trust the people of Alabama. I've always trusted the people, and I'll continue to do that. But that is not the answer to our problems. One of the questions one of the inferences that my opponent just talked about, in Florida, he said there were 20 million or 20 billion, I don't know what it was, of lottery money. And what happened in Florida was, sure, that went to education, but then they took the money that was going to education away from education. So it was a net sum zero. It didn't help education. And so, you just have to look at, are any of these states that have lotteries, are they doing extremely well right now? No, they're not. And so you just have to look to see if taking money from poor people, right, that's mostly where it comes from, to educate wealthy people on the lottery, and that's where it mostly goes, if that's the way we want to do it in Alabama. But here again, I believe the people's right to vote on issues, and if a bill is developed in the legislature and it's fair and not written by the gamblers, then I'm not opposed to the people of Alabama voting on it.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley. Mr. Sparks?
Well, let me tell you the difference. The difference is there's been 1.2 million scholarships given to children in the state of Georgia. The difference is there's been 1 million children in the state of Georgia that's had the opportunity to get pre-K. Now, to me, that's better than what Alabama's doing, because $300 million of that's coming from Alabama people. Folks, if you want to find out what's going on in this country, go to Tennessee every day and look at the number of people that are traveling across our lines every day buying lottery tickets. Is there anybody in this room that believes that we are going to stop people from Alabama from buying lottery tickets? Raise your hand. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. The problem is we're giving other states our revenues and letting our children suffer. Our children are not getting an opportunity to go to college. And I want to give them that opportunity. And the difference between me and Representative Bentley is that I'll fight for a lottery. I'll fight for a lottery for the children of Alabama. And yeah, the state of Florida, I don't live in Florida. I'm not going to offer, let me tell you this. I will not ask you to vote for a lottery if it don't do two things. If it does not go to pre-K and college scholarships, I'll never put it on the ballot. And the only way I put it on the ballot is ask the legislature to pass enabling legislation that says if you vote for a lottery, this is where the money's going to go. Folks, our children deserve it. I will fight for it to make sure that every child in Alabama has an opportunity to have a good life. I'll give you a story right quick. I stood at a news conference one day in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was talking about the lottery. A young girl came up beside me and she said, Commissioner, I make A's and B's in school, but my mom and dad can't afford to send me to college, so I'm going to have to live a D life. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want our children living a D life because they don't have the same opportunities as other people. I don't know about you, I don't. And And I'm willing to fight for a lottery because there's only 2 states east of Nevada that don't have a lottery: Alabama and Mississippi.
Any response, Mr. Bennett?
Well, I want to create real jobs. That's what I want to do. I want real jobs where people are producing something. You know what? Who is it to say that the government is supposed to educate all of our children and give them a free education?
Right.
You know what? That's families' jobs. That's your job. I want you to have a real job so that you can send your children to college. It's not the government's responsibility to do that. It's your responsibility. Why should the government have to pay for your child going to college? And not every child is going to go to college, and not every child is supposed to go to college. We need good technical schools. We need to teach people how to get out and get a real job, and then they can pay taxes, and then they can support the government. And most of the time in all these states where you look at it, where you have a lottery, they take the money for the lottery for education, and then they take that same amount of money away. Let me tell you, I've been in the legislature for 8 years. We have to move money around. That's how you have to do it. And I can tell you, it's not going to increase things. Things are going to stay about the same. It's just we're adding something in the state. But here again, I want to say one more time that I'm going to leave it up to the people of Alabama if we can write something that is not controlled by the gambling interest.
Any further response, Mr. Sparks?
You know, there are children in Alabama that don't live with odds inherit. And there's children in Alabama that don't have hope. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to change Alabama, we need to give every child in Alabama hope. You know, there's some children where mom and dad's doing the best they can, but there's no way they can ever send them to college. It is an absolutely crime for us to sit here and continue to let Alabamians go across the line every day and buy lottery tickets and say it's okay and pretend it's not happening when the price of a college education is going up 3 times as fast as an average family income. If we want to change Alabama, let's educate Alabama, and then we'll change Alabama.
Next issue is health care, and Mr. Sparks, we'll start with you this time. This is a national debate, but what can we do on a state level to ensure that Alabamians have affordable and accessible health care options?
Well, I think that's a very, very good question, and I know that there's been a lot of emotional debates about health care, about the health care bill that's been passed in Washington, D.C. I don't think a lot of people understand that in the next legislative session in Alabama, we have got to pass a number of laws pertaining to the law that was passed by the federal government. Now, we can sit back and scratch our head, we can fuss about it, we can do whatever we want to do. But my plan is to reach out there and pull from the best of the best. We've got the University of Alabama in Birmingham, we've got the University of South Alabama. We ought to be bringing those folks in, we ought to be bringing business leaders in. We need to find the way to put together the best policies we can so that Alabama implements the best health care we possibly can. Now, we can stand back and fight it and say we don't want to do it. You know what happens? The federal government will take it over. I don't know about you, but I want to be in control of our destiny. I want to recruit the best of the best to make sure we get the proper legislation to get the job done. I'll tell you a quick little story. I had a 42-year-old nephew that was walking from the Walmart parking lot to his car. And he fell over dead in the Walmart parking lot at 42 years old because he could never have affordable health care. I don't know about you, but I don't want people across Alabama falling dead in Walmart parking lots. I want to make sure that we do everything that we possibly can with the legislation in Alabama to come with good legislation so that we can do something about health care. And if it's not right, let's change it. If the federal government law is not right, let's change it. It is what's here, we've got to deal with it, and the legislature's got to deal with it, and the next governor's got to deal with it. So let's pick from those from the University of Alabama, South Alabama, and the professionals across this state. Let's pass the best we can in Alabama for the people of Alabama.
Well, you don't have to choose from the University of Alabama or South Alabama. You need to elect a governor that's a doctor. Let me tell you, we need accessible and affordable health care in Alabama. And there are things that we need to do. The federal government is totally going the wrong way. We need a new Congress and a new president. Let me tell you, that's what we need in this country. And we need simple things like being able to buy insurance across state lines, by being able to deduct your insurance premium off of your state income tax or your federal income tax. These are just simple things that can be done. In Alabama, we need more primary care physicians in Alabama, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start something called the Alabama Health Service Corps. We're going to require 25% of the seats in both medical schools to be set aside as primary care seats from the beginning. And after the second year, they have to decide which specialty they're going to go into. And then they have to serve areas of need in order to get the scholarship that they'll get, plus that seat in medical school. I helped fund the Alabama Medical Education Consortium in 2004. This is through the osteopathic medical program in this country. Today, we are starting a new osteopathic medical school in the Wiregrass area that's going to have 150 students a year. I started that program in 2004. We need electronic medical records in this state. You need to be able to own your own health records, and you ought to be able to take them to each doctor and plug them in immediately. And we ought to interface all of this all over the state of Alabama. We ought to give doctors who will see indigent patients, we ought to give them tax credits, just like we do lawyers who will see indigent patients. We ought to give doctors who will see indigent patients tax credits. There's so many things that we can do. Insurance, for instance. We need an insurance exchange in Alabama to have more insurance companies other than just Blue Cross writing health insurance in Alabama. We ought to be able to write bare bones policies and allow you to decide what is in your policy rather than the legislature dictating what is to be covered in that policy. There's so many things that we can do. Now, my opponent is exactly right. In 2014, if you're below 133% of the poverty level, you will go on Medicaid. All right? Everyone got the Cornhusker kickback. Every state did. So for 4 years, the federal government is going to give Alabama extra money. But in 2018, that money is no longer going to be available, and it's going to cost the state $100 million extra a year. It is important that you understand this. On page 466 of the health care bill, it says that every state shall be responsible for the health care of its citizens. That's what the bill says. That means I'm going to be responsible as governor, or whoever is the governor will be responsible, and the legislature. These are things that you have to understand. And that's why, and I didn't mean to make it as a joke, that's why you need to elect somebody who understands this. It is a significant issue that's going to face us every day.
Mr. Sparks, any further?
Well, I don't know if we need a doctor, but I sure know we need a second opinion. And you know, if you're that concerned about what's been passed, and we all should be concerned, and if you wanted to defeat it, Dr. Bentley, you're running for the wrong office. You should have run for Congress. Folks, the problem is this has been passed. We need to deal with it effectively. And we need to incorporate those who understand it. And that is the University of Alabama in Birmingham, the University of South Alabama, the business leaders of this state, and we need to introduce legislation in Alabama that you will support. If we don't, hear me loud and clear, the federal government will take our program and do just exactly what he says he don't want to happen and will run our program for us. I don't want that to happen. I want to provide leadership. And I want to pass legislation that will benefit Alabamians.
Dr. Bentley.
Well, I do understand it. I basically have read that entire bill. I do understand what's going on. And I understand what's coming down the pipe. And I understand this, that we can, in the states, fight what's happening in Washington. And in fact, I sponsored House Bill 42, which says that no person, no company, no health care provider shall be compelled to participate in any healthcare system. That's the one that was just passed in Missouri by 71%. And that would allow you to vote on it and put it in our Constitution, and then when we go to court, it'll be much stronger. So it is important that you understand what's going on. And you need practicing physicians who have dealt with the federal government, who have dealt with insurance every day, like I have for 35 years. That's the type of person you need who understands this particular situation.
Next question will go first to Dr. Bentley. Cities all across Alabama, including ARAB, consist primarily of small businesses. What do you propose to do as governor to support the expansion and growth of small business?
Well, I covered that somewhat in my opening statement. Small businesses create 75% of the jobs in this state, and we need to support small businesses. We need to help the creation and the sustaining of those businesses. And we do that by cutting red tape. That's one of the ways that we do it. What we do is, as I said in the beginning, we need an attitude adjustment down in Montgomery. We need people to realize in Montgomery that citizens and small businesses particularly are the consumers, and we need to look at them as consumers. I want to start what I call an Office of Small Business Development that'll teach people. If you want to start a small business, most of you who started a small business, you know that you had no clue about how to do it. You didn't know what forms to fill out, you didn't know what taxes you were going to pay, you didn't know any of this stuff. You need somebody that gives you a 1, 2, 3, 4 way of starting this business. Then once it gets started, you need someone that'll help you. You need someone that you can call every day and say, what am I doing right or what am I doing wrong? How can you help me? Another problem that we're having in this state right now is capital. It's hard to borrow money in this state. And that may be the real reason that we're not starting as many businesses as we should, is because people can't get money. So I want to do everything for the banks, especially the community banks, to help them loan people money to get started in developing small businesses. Small business is where it is. Most of you who have a business, it's a small business. Last year and the year before, we gave deductions to small businesses for people who will give health insurance. We gave 150% deduction if you pay health insurance, if you have less than 25 employees in the state. We need to increase that to maybe 50 or higher. But those are the types of things that we need to do. But small businesses are where the jobs are, and that's where we need to be working.
Mr. Sparks.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, for the past few years, you have sent some wonderful individuals to Montgomery to represent you from this district. You sent folks from the House, you sent folks from the Senate, and I don't know of one of them that needs a bath. I think they need leadership. They need someone that's willing to step across the line and work with them. That's what we need. Pointing fingers in Montgomery is not going to get the job done. It all sounds good on the campaign trail, but folks, people in Alabama are out of work. I am a small businessman. I've been a small businessman. I know how tough it is to write paychecks for the people that work for you. I know how tough it is to live with state regulations or federal regulations or whatever it may be. We've got to do everything that we can to keep small business retention. It's easier to keep a business in Alabama and costs less to keep a business in Alabama than it does to recruit businesses to Alabama. We need to continue to recruit. But every time you step up to the plate, you're not going to hit a home run. We've got to give incentives. I am going to hire a Secretary of Small Business so that we go out and work with business leaders across Alabama to give them the incentives that they need so that they can hire 2 or 3 more folks, so that they don't have to go through the red tape to handle with Washington and those things. Work with them, but make sure that anything that comes across your desk that's going to be punitive to small business in Alabama, I will veto it. It will not happen in Alabama under my watch, because I am a small businessman. I understand it. And I understand that the people of Alabama need jobs, and we've got to create those jobs so that they can go back to work.
Any further, Dr. Bentley?
Well, I started my practice in 1974, and it became a very large practice. We had between 30 and 40 employees during that time. I understand exactly what a small business owner has to do. We paid the same taxes everyone else had did. We went through the same problems, and I started that by myself. So I understand what it is to start one. And it's very important that we do everything we can to create jobs in this state. Real jobs. And that's what I'm saying. Real jobs are created by businesses. It's not created falsely by the lottery or any of these other ways. It's created by real people and real businesses, and we need to do everything we can for those people.
Any further, Mr. Sparks? Okay, gentlemen, next question. We're going to watch the time a little closer here, too. In ARAB, many families have at least one person in their household working in Huntsville. Those families are often tied to the defense and space industry. Changes that have been proposed for NASA are impacting families across North Alabama. What is your stance on this issue, Mr. Sparks?
That's a very, very important issue. And when you go back talking about everybody in Congress needs to be voted out, folks, I don't know about you, but I don't want to send Senator Shelby home yet. Because we need that leadership in Washington so that we don't lose Bragg, so that we don't lose those jobs in North Alabama. This is a time that you've got to reach out and work with the federal government. There's a $10 billion military business in Alabama. And we can stand here and point to the federal government. But ladies and gentlemen, did you know that Alabama, for every dollar we send to Washington, we get $1.66 back? Now, we can stand here and it sounds good, but I want to work with the Senator Shelbys of the world to make sure, because I grew up in North Alabama. I know how important Huntsville is. We got to start rebuilding the infrastructure. We got to start building roads. But I will have someone in a high-level position as of day one. So start looking at base realignment again, because Alabama don't need to be on the dark board when it comes to realignment of our bases. We need to fight for those bases. We need to fight for Redstone Arsenal. We need to fight for NASA. And we need to do everything that we can to work with our leaders in Washington, D.C. We need to work with Representative Adderhope. We need to work with those guys to keep these jobs in Alabama. That's what I'm going to do as the governor. I'm going to reach across the line and say, let's work together so that Alabama can go to work tomorrow.
Ultimately.
You know, for years, this part of North Alabama has been so dependent on federal dollars that there's been a disconnect between Montgomery and this part of the state, especially around Huntsville. But it's beginning to reconnect, and I'm glad to see it. You know, actually, what I see next to the Black Caucus, which is very strong in Montgomery, the best caucus that you have up there is your North Alabama caucus, because they stick together. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they stick together, and I like that. I think you have to stick together to get anything done. But Redstone Arsenal is the #1 employer in the state of Alabama. The #1, 33,000 people. And we don't know when the renegotiation of Bragg's going to take place. It may take place in 2015, but we don't know that. At some point that it will take place. But if it does take place, which it will, we have to make sure that infrastructure is there, and that has to come from the state. We have to make sure, as the governor, we have to make sure that that infrastructure is proper, that it will fit into the plans through which we can re-win the BRAC programs. So it's very important that we look at North Alabama. I visited the other day Hudson Alpha. I mean, this is amazing what they're doing there. The biotech industry up there is phenomenal. So there are a lot of high-paying jobs, and the people in Montgomery need to realize this, that the education of our children is not by the lottery, but by income tax that's paid by high-paid workers. The average salary in Huntsville is $80,000 a year. 54% of our education dollars, 54% comes from income tax. So it's so important that we have these high-paying jobs. So I think the disconnect is no longer there, because we realize the importance, especially when it comes to educating our children. But we have to do the right things. We have to have the infrastructure and the education up there, so that when BRAC is renegotiated, then it will help that area up there.
Any further, Mr. Sparks?
Yes, sir. I think the difference in me visiting North Alabama is that I grew up in North Alabama. I know how important NASA BRAC and all that is. And I think when you're running for governor, we need to really understand who employs who. I think the University of Alabama at Birmingham is the #1 employer in the state. Certainly NASA is extremely important, and we've got to do everything that we can to build that infrastructure. But I don't just visit. I grew up. I've hunted, fished in the waters all over North Alabama. I've gone to Huntsville. I've played ball in this region. I know North Alabama as well as anybody knows North Alabama.
Dr. Bentley, thank you. Okay, we'll begin with you here, Mr. Bentley. So many people across our state are out of work. However, reports last week show unemployment has dropped to 9.7% in July from 10.3% in June. The last time Alabama's jobless rate was that low was April of 2009. What do you think is contributing to the drop in unemployment rates, and how can we continue to ensure a health economy for our state?
Well, we need to, as I said in my opening statement, what we need to do is we need, on a short-term basis, we need to give the tax incentives and the tax credits to businesses that are already here in order to create jobs, just like we did with the Reemployment Act of 2010 that I got passed the legislature unanimously. That will put 5,000 people back to work. Now, that may not sound like a lot of people compared to the 206,000 people who are unemployed today. But let me tell you, if you're one of those 5,000 people, it is important. So that is a short-term basis, and I have already gone over an environment through which we create jobs, and we continue to do that. But we also need to look at companies that are already in existence here that are even considering leaving Alabama. I've never heard a governor say this, but like the sock factories up in Commissioner's area up there. We need to go to these people, and if they're going to leave Alabama, we need to say, what can we do to help you stay? You have the infrastructure and the people already here. Can we give you tax incentives, tax credits? Can we keep you here? Now, we may not be able to do it, but you know what? We need to try. And so we need to do everything we possibly can to keep jobs in Alabama. Let me say one other thing that I want to do. I want Alabama jobs to go to Alabama people and to Alabama companies. I don't want us hiring paving companies out of Mississippi. I don't want us having engineering firms come out of Mississippi or Georgia or any other places. We've got plenty of construction people in Alabama, and we have plenty of expertise here. I want Alabama jobs to go to Alabama workers.
Thank you, Dr. Bentley. Mr. Sparks.
Well, the first thing you do is you put people back to work. And that's what my road program would do. The $1.4 billion road program that I've laid on the table will create 38,000 jobs. You know, I was the first candidate to stand up against that $168 million contract in Birmingham when we went to a Georgia company. We could have made that into 3 contracts so that the people of Alabama could have bid for that job and possibly got that job in Alabama. I believe that if you're going to use taxpayer money to build jobs, you need to use taxpayer people to build those jobs. We don't need to be going out of state. I stood on Hyundai down there when you couldn't even get an application in Alabama because they wouldn't hire from Alabama. We changed that. Folks, we've got to create jobs. I will create 38,000 jobs immediately with a road program that we're going to start building from North Alabama to South Alabama.
Any further, Dr. Bentley?
Well, you know, my opponent comes up with these numbers, 38,000. I don't know how you come up with how many jobs. I want to say this about I was one of the first people to support the jobs programs related to roads that we passed this last year. And by the way, I hope all of y'all vote for that. Because that's going to put $100 million a year into the road program. And it's not road program that is large interstates. Much of this money is going to come to smaller communities. Because I can tell you, building roads is done much more efficiently if you give the money to local people than if you do it through the DOT, which takes 30% right off the top. So I'm for building roads. I think when you build roads in this state and you build houses in this state, the economy tremendously increases and people will go back to work, and that's what we need to do.
Any further, Mr. Sparks? Thank you. Although the oil spill is having direct impact on counties in South Alabama, the decrease in sales tax revenue generated through the tourist industry is going to indirectly impact all of our state. How do you plan to address funding needs for our state, Mr. Sparks?
Well, I've said all along, certainly BP has been a disaster that we had no idea that was coming to Alabama, and I've said all along that I'm going to stay in their hip pocket till they make Alabama the way it was before they got here. And that's a promise that I make the people of Alabama. Folks, the bottom line is this, it's as simple as it can possibly be. There is nowhere to go to get any additional revenue in Alabama except for those businesses that are doing business in Alabama, these gaming operations that have not been paying their fair share. As governor, they are going to pay their fair share, 25 to 30%. If anybody thinks we're going to go bulldoze that building down on 85 going to Auburn, or if anybody thinks we're going to bulldoze that building down on 57 going south on 65, it ain't going to happen. Let's get the money and let's use it to educate our children and take care of Medicaid. I have laid a plan on the table that will generate money. And I want to hear the other plan. We've got to have some additional revenue so that we can take care of essential programs like Medicaid, like education, and building roads.
The plan to fund our education budget and our general fund budget is to put people back to work. And we do everything we possibly can to do that. Taxing gambling is a temporary thing. But what we need to do are having real jobs that produce something. And people have real jobs. And here again, I've said before, if people want it, I'm going to let people vote on a good, clean bill, not written by the gamblers. But listen, folks, the education budget is 54% income tax, 26% sales tax, 4% use tax. All of that money comes from people working. And if they're not working, we don't have the money to fund education. It all comes from people having jobs. That's where it comes from. The general fund is made up of about 32 small taxes that are not as dependent on the economy, but they still are. And it's going to be a significant issue this next 4 years, and hopefully I'm going to be able to take a salary because I hope we get unemployment down to 5.2%. But I can tell you, that is the way we do it. I want to do everything I can to get people working again, and we're going to cut red tape. We're going to do the things. We cannot be dependent just on gambling. If the people of Alabama want it, like I say, I'm going to let them vote on it if we have a clean bill, but let me tell you, that is not the answer. The answer is a real job where people produce something.
Any further, Mr. Farr?
I just want to make it real clear. I'm going to take a salary because I'm a working man. I still got house payments to make. I still got grandchildren I got to take care of. I still have obligations. What's $100,000 in an $8 billion budget? Surely to goodness, ladies and gentlemen. You know, that's why I said we're going to create 38,000 jobs by building roads. I've got the same analysis that Representative Bentley says that he's going to be 5,000 jobs. I want him to tell me how many of those 5,000 jobs that he created have gone to work since the legislative session, and how much money has gone to those businesses from the time you passed that bill. Let's tell the people of Alabama the truth. When you become governor, you have a responsibility. And the responsibility is to put people back to work, and I'm telling you, we're going to put 38,000 by building roads in Alabama. We're going to help small industry. We're going to give incentive programs, and we're going to change Alabama. And it's going to be tough. Folks, we're in a terrible situation. We're in a recession. We've come through a recession. We don't know where we're headed again. But we have got to create jobs, and by doing that, we build a road program in Alabama.
Any further, Dr. Bentley?
Well, my Reemployment Act of 2010 cannot possibly take place until someone hires someone and keeps them for a year. So that'll be next year that they will get the deduction. But, you know, we can argue over numbers all we want to, but I can tell you the people of Alabama are hurting. And what I want to do is, and I too have not had a salary this last year, and I'm not going to take a salary because I do want to identify with people that are not that are hurting right now. I've been in their situation before, and I understand that. So we're going to just work hard, and we're going to try to put people back to work, and, as I say, in real jobs.
One final question. As we watch other states deal very aggressively with immigration issues, how do you plan to address illegal immigration in Alabama? First off, Dr. Bentley.
Well, you know, this to some industries is a difficult question, because I know that some people have trouble in some industries finding people to do the jobs that they would like to have done. And I understand that. But let me tell you, as the chief magistrate of the state, it is my job to enforce the laws. And I do believe that if you did not have a job and you were an illegal alien, you would not be here. So let me tell you what's happening. Companies are hiring, willingly and knowingly hiring illegal aliens. And when you knowingly and willingly hire an illegal alien, you're breaking the law. And you cannot get past that. If the federal government refuses to do its job, then it's the state's responsibility to do it. I believe in E-Verify. And every contract and subcontract that's let in the state of Alabama, we're going to use E-Verify, and we're going to make sure that your tax dollars go to legal citizens. So E-Verify is a way we can use 287G training for our police force. Now, I don't know that we want to do that for everybody, but this is another way to do it. The lady, the governor, Governor Brewer in Arizona, I am proud of her. And as the governor of the state of Alabama, if I have to stand up to the federal government just like she did, I'm going to do it.
Mr. Sparks.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you know, Alabama is known as an international trade and job center of the world, and that's the way I want to keep it as governor of the state of Alabama. So by have saying that, I want to say this, that if you're in Alabama and you're an undocumented worker, undocumented illegal in this state, and you get picked up by the police, then you get no bail. If you're in Alabama and you are getting on government assistance today, we need to stop it. We don't need to be giving folks that are undocumented in Alabama government taxpayers' money. If you're in Alabama and you do business in Alabama today, we need a system so that farmers and so that business people can legitimately check and make sure that they are documented workers. If they're not, we need to find a system to stop it. Those are the kind of things that we need to send the message across the country. Alabama, we've had our day in the limelight, ladies and gentlemen. We don't need to send the wrong message around the world. We can handle this situation in Alabama the proper way. There's no doubt in my mind. I've been in agriculture now for 7.5 years. And there is a lot of documented workers that come to Alabama to help agriculture during the agricultural seasons. But we need to make sure that when they come, they go back. And we need to make sure that we have a system, but we also need a comprehensive immigration package passed by Washington, D.C. and enforced by Alabama and the federal government.
Any further, Dr. Bennett?
Well, I agree that we need something done by the federal government. The trouble is the federal government is not doing anything. They're not doing their job. And I believe that as governor of the state of Alabama, I have the right to protect the state of Alabama because that is my job. And I'm going to do that. And if it comes to do what Arizona has done, as I said, I'm willing to do that. I am willing to stand up to protect the state of Alabama because I am going to be the governor of Alabama. And I am the only one, as the chief magistrate of this state, who has the ability and the right to do that.
Mr. Sparks.
The difference is that he's going to stand up. I've been standing up. I've been standing up for the people of Alabama. I've stood up against foreign countries that want to send food into Alabama that's contaminated. I've stood up against the federal government that wants to put agriculture out of business. And I will stand up for Alabama when I become the governor of this state on the undocumented workers in Alabama. That is an issue that I promised the people of Alabama.
Gentlemen, thank you both. Brandon, your call as far as we're over time by about 19 minutes already. As far as taking any further questions, the gentleman may want to meet with people privately after we meet.